Hello again, this is Professor Linz from the University of Colorado Law Library. In previous video presentations, we've looked at how to research statutory law and regulatory law and secondary authority research. In this presentation, we'll be looking at how to do case law research. When doing case law research, there really are two fundamental tasks. One is to find the cases that are relevant and related to your research problem and hopefully binding to the jurisdiction in which you're practicing. And the second is to validate the cases. That is to say, to update the cases to make sure that they are still good law. Methods for finding cases. Well, we've already looked at two of the methods for finding cases. That is, we can find cases from secondary authority and we can find cases from an annotated code. There are two additional methods, though, for finding cases. These would include keyword searching and structured searching. For keyword searching, we mean, of course, running a search either as a natural language search or terms and connector search, and presumably running those searches within fields when you do searching within the database itself. Structured searching means that someone else essentially has identified the cases for us through some means. Those means are a head note and the digest that head notes are a part of, and also through a citator. For updating cases, the method is really to use the tool that is a citator. There are two that are available to us. Lexus Advanced has one called Shepherd. It's the older of the two tools, originated in print. The newer one produced by Westlaw is called KeyCite. They're both equally effective. And they have two functions. One is, as I said, to validate cases to make sure they're still good law, but they also report cases that cite to our case and they help us extend or expand our case law research. So before we get into looking at the ways in which we find cases through keywords or through a digest, we need to understand a little bit about case law publication. When a court issues an opinion, it initially publishes that opinion as a slip opinion. It gets posted to their website, and that opinion will include, of course, the text of the opinion and perhaps a syllabus or a summary of what the court said. Such a thing might look like this. Here is a slip opinion from the United States Supreme Court on the left, and then it gets posted to the court's website. You see a screenshot of that on the right. And also you see that you could go to the court's website and you could download that opinion, search for that opinion somehow through their court website. But the court also sends that opinion to publishers. And when publishers such as Thomson Reuters, Westlaw, and Lexus obtain the case, somebody at those publishing companies reads the cases and then they add editorial enhancements. And these enhancements include perhaps a summary of the case. They're going to add head notes. They're going to index the case contents and identify which parts of the case belong into the fields that they've arranged for those cases. They're also going to link that case to statutes and other authority that's applicable to that case. And this is how, when we are in an annotated code, we can find cases that are related to a statute. And importantly, they will assign that case a reporter citation. Finally, when that's complete, they'll add that case to a case law database. The process for a publisher to do this is very fast. It can be from an hour to several hours, but it gets done very quickly, especially for U.S. Supreme Court opinions. So here is a case that from West Publishing that was assigned a reporter citation. This actually is here from the Supreme Court. And then it added in this one case as editorial enhancement is a background of the case. And there are additional editorial enhancements which are not on the slide. And then the case gets published into a case law database. Here is the collection of case law databases available for searching on Westlaw. This is generally for cases. Then you can see you can search for all federal or state cases or cases by court, cases by circuit, cases by state. You could, for a terms and connectors or natural language search, of course, you could enter your search terms here to search for all the cases, and I have pre-selected all federal as my jurisdiction. Or you can open up to a particular case law database and do searching. If you do this, if you choose to search within, for example, the 10th Circuit Cases database or the U.S. Supreme Court Cases database, you can take advantage of case law fields. In Westlaw, these fields include the citation. This is the citation of the court opinion, the party name or the names who are in litigation, the docket number, which is the number that the court assigns to the matter. It's a very useful search field. The synopsis or summary of the case. You can search by the judge who authored the majority opinion, concurring opinion, or dissenting opinion, the attorneys who argued the case, and you can search within the digest, which includes the digest, a topic, and a headnote. We'll look at that shortly. And of course, you can search within the opinion of the case itself. In Westlaw, you can do this by going to the advanced search field, and then you can enter in your search terms into the fields that are given to us through this template. So here you see if you want to search for just some within the party name, you can enter that search here, or the citation in this field. Here's attorney, here's judge, etc. If you are uncertain what those fields relate to, the help here on the right-hand side, the little PDF document that we just saw, will tell us what those fields relate to. So that's one method for finding cases, the keyword searching method. The other approach is structure searching. And this really refers to the headnotes and the headnotes that are part of the digest. And this is going to take a little background explanation to understand and then to use. So the headnotes, of course, are the little summaries of the points of law that editors add to toward the front of the case, the top part of the case. And you can see from these examples, here are headnotes from Westlaw and headnotes from Lexus on the right-hand side. These are both drawn from the same case from those publishing companies. And when the editor reads the case, they identify the various points of law discussed by the court in that case, and then they assign to it a headnote topic and a headnote subtopic. And in this case, you see that the first of the headnote topics is federal civil procedure, then commerce and water law. And on the Lexus case, there's something about transportation law, water transportation, and governments. Those headnotes really are part of a larger hierarchy of American case law, and that hierarchy is called the digest. And this is best illustrated using the West Digest system, which is very old. It dates back to the 1880s. And it's very comprehensive. What West did is they created a subject organization of American case law. So you see on the right-hand side of the slide all of the topics in which case law is categorized. And there are over 400 of these topics, and they range from abandoned lost property through negligence and bankruptcy, the whole range of American case law. The topics are hierarchically arranged, so within the larger topic are various subtopics. And as I said, the editors categorize each part of the case into one of these topics and into one or more of these subtopics. The advantage of using the digest for your research is that allows for you to find cases that are not directly related factually to your case, but discuss the same concepts or points of law. It's a very powerful tool. We'll explain a little bit more about it. So here's an example of the digest hierarchy. Here the topic is labor and employment, and this is zooming in on a particular part of labor and employment. The subtopic falls under Section 7, adverse employment action, and then subpart A in general. And here are the very specific key numbers that apply, that West has determined apply here. And these include such subtopics as the law that governs a preemption or wrongful discharge, wages and hours, etc. So together in the West world, this is a topic and key number system. The key is a little trademark from West, and they attach the key number before the number that applies to the subtopic. Topic and key number system. It has two gigantic advantages for researchers. One is that using the head notes and using the digest allows for cross-jurisdictional research. All of the cases that are published by West, published by Lexus, use the same hierarchical system of topics and subtopics. Therefore, if you find a case in a jurisdiction that is not the controlling jurisdiction but discusses the relevant points of law for your problem, you can search for the head notes through the head note system, the digest system, in the jurisdiction that applies to your problem. And if there are cases there, you will find those cases that are relevant. It also helps us clarify term usage. Courts may use different words to express the same idea, or the way in which we express an idea may change over the decades. The West editors take care of all that for us, and regardless of how the term is expressed or the concept is expressed or the factual items in the case, it will put together cases that are conceptually related to each other, that fall within those topics and subtopics of law together. This allows us to do more comprehensive and thorough research, and we're less dependent upon our ability to write good keyword searches. In Westlaw, you can search the topic and key number system directly. It is one of the content areas, key numbers, and you can see the entire key number directory. If you did a search, for example, here I'm doing a search for attractive nuisance, it will return to you those topics and subtopics in which the attractive nuisance doctrine is discussed. In this example happens to fall under negligence. There's attractive nuisance, and then there are a number of key numbers that apply to it. If you followed those links, it would produce for you the cases that are cited to those particular subtopics. You can also search the digest system using the fields. I mentioned in a previous slide that there was a digest field. There are actually three of them. There's the head note field, the topic field, and the digest field. And so you can search those blurbs that are at the tops of the cases by putting your keywords into one of these field identifiers. Down below, you see I have an example of a search where we're combining fields and keyword searching to find relevant cases. In this case, this search JU (ID) and TO (272 K1172) is asking our database to return cases to us that were authored by Justice Ide of the Colorado Supreme Court, and then but dealing with, or where the case is about the topic of labor and employment law. So let's go to our research problem that we've been working on through all of these lectures. And we're back to Jane Gabildit, and she is trying to determine if she can fill a creek that's on her property. And so far we have traced our research through the Clean Water Act, and it really hinges on what the definition is of navigable water. We've learned that in the Clean Water Act, there is no good definition for navigable water. It's really left up to the interpretation of the courts. So at this point, let's see how we can search the case law to find a definition for navigable water.
So for searching for cases, let's start in the United States Code. Our previous research indicated that the definition section for this problem is to be found at 33 United States Code section 1362. Subsection 7 provides a definition of navigable waters, which means the waters of the United States, including territorial seas. This is not altogether helpful. So we'd like to find related cases. We could certainly scroll through the document until we get to the cases section of the document, but we could also take advantage of this menu to jump to the different parts of the statute, and we find one here is case notes. We jump to it, we find that there are a lot of cases that have been cited to this section of the United States Code. The editors provided us with a table of contents of those cases, and we see that there is navigable waters under Section 2, and relationships and waters included on their definition, so we're in good shape. Let's assume we could certainly enter a search term here looking for stream or creek. We could certainly, though, I think, just scroll down to it. You see navigable waters already shows up on our screen, and we could begin to look through these various case blurbs to find out what might be most relevant. For purposes of our discussion, let's assume we wanted to look at this particular case. Term navigable waters within the meaning of FWPCA is to be given broadest possible constitutional interpretation under the Commerce Clause. And this is Leslie Salt Company. Looks like it was decided in 1978. So let's go ahead and open up to that case. So this is one way that we can find a case. And this is the way Lexus presents the information, and there's some things that we'd like to pay attention to. First of all, we get the citation from the print reporter. This is a federal reporter, which is actually published by West Publishing, and it's read as volume 578 of the Federal Reporter second series at page 742. We'd make note of that. We note the date of decision. We note the court. This comes out of the Ninth Circuit. These are the various docket numbers. And then there are parallel citations. So the case is picked up and published by other publishers and given different citations. Lexus also gives us a bit of a history of the case and handily core terms. So if we were doing a terms and connectors or natural language search, we weren't quite sure what to use, we might look at their core terms, presumably using these in a keyword search would help us find a document like this. Lexus, this is one of our editorial enhancements, provides us with a nice case summary, the procedural posture, an overview, and an outcome. So we can pretty quickly get a sense for what's going on here. There are the Lexus headnotes that we looked at in the slide presentation. Let's skip over those for now. There are quite a few of them. We then jump to the counsel. This is the attorneys who argued the case, the judge who issued the opinion, and here is the opinion of the case itself. The star here, the star 744, it's called star pagination, and this refers to the page number in the print reporter, the first one that they cite. So that refers to page 744 of volume 578 of the Federal Reporter. So if you were citing this document, you would know, you would note that this text, these appeals, etc., would appear at page 744 in that reporter. Here's the beginning of page 745. If you see 2 stars or 3 stars, that means it's citing to one of the other citations listed at the top of the case. All right, and then we read through the opinion. It would be a long opinion, and we could scroll through a whole bunch of these things, of the cases, the procedural posture, and finally the ruling of the court. If there is a concurring opinion or a dissenting opinion, these would follow the main opinion. And there's some footnotes provided as well following the opinion. Okay, so we found the case. Now what, right? This is a case, and there, we know from looking at the annotations that there are a lot more cases. One way to get to those cases, other than going back to the annotations, is to look at these headnotes. So again, the idea of the headnotes is that this is going to, the editors have linked together all the cases that are relevant to related to this particular area of law, and we see what they are: transportation law, water transportation waterways, water transportation waterways again, governments, civil procedure, transportation law, real property law, easements, aviation easements. There are a whole bunch of different topics that are addressed within this case. The one we might be most interested in, though, would be this one, Coverage and Definitions, Navigable Waters. So this is head note 13. If we clicked on this little arrow, it would take us to the point in the case where the editor drew out this point of law for this head note. And this is what it would say: legal definition, navigable waters, etc. includes any waterway within the United States, including normally dry arroyos through which water may flow, where such water will ultimately end up in the public waterway. Well, we like this. This seems to work for us. So what we can do is click on this more like this head note, which should bring us to additional cases. And before I do that, I just want to point out that this head note is under this topic of environmental law, Clean Water Act, coverage and definitions, navigable waters. This is useful. And we go to more like this head note, and it will provide for us, it looks like, an additional 3,962 cases that have that talk about the same point of law. And importantly, and I'll point this out, the Rapanos case is the leading case. That's an important case. So they did find related cases that we cared about. This is the Intermediate Circuit Court of Appeals decision from the Sixth Circuit, and here's the U.S. Supreme Court decision. Setting aside that for now, though, that's a lot of cases. We can certainly search within the results. We can narrow down and look for cases within a particular jurisdiction. For example, the 10th Circuit, looks like there are 34 cases that come out of the 10th Circuit. Or we can look within states. We can narrow by a time frame, and then we can find other information out to help us expedite our search. At this point, we can use these tools to find additional cases. We can certainly open up to our key case and read that, and then use additional tools to find additional cases. That's the one method. That's the head note method as it's implemented on Lexus. How about how it's implemented on Westlaw? So here is Westlaw, and I've already pulled up our Leslie Salt Company case. And so taking a quick look at this, one thing we'll want to know, of course, is the caption of the case. This has the same information that Lexus does. The parallel reporter citations gives us a page range. The tabs are good to look at. This tab is the document tab. That's the case we're looking at. The treatment and history, even the cited references, all have to do with the citator. We'll get to that in a minute. And the table authorities are cases and other authorities that this case has cited. The editors at West have given us a synopsis, the holding, and then much like the Lexus case, you're going to find the opinion, the same opinion, of course, the same text, and then the same information in terms of the judges and the attorneys. The treatment of head notes is a little different, though, on Westlaw. So here we see head notes 1, 2, 3, etc., starting with federal civil procedure, commerce, water law. And again, the 3 is the location in the case where the editors found this point of law. So if you click on 3, it'll jump you down to the point of the case where they talk about it. And this looks useful, right? Water law, the term navigable waters has been judicially defined to cover non-tidal waters which are navigable in the past or which could be made navigable, in fact, by reasonable improvements, and waters in the ebb and flow of the tide. So we could click on 5 cases that cite this head note, and that would be fine. The other approach, the broader approach, we can use, though, in Westlaw, is to take advantage of the digest. So here's a piece of that digest hierarchy that we talked about in the slide presentation. The topic is water law, and then here are the various subtopics, from navigable waters to navigable waters in general, the test of navigability in general. And there are actually 2 key numbers that apply: ebb and flow of tide and test of navigability. The West editors determined that those were 2 separate key numbers, but they both apply to this particular one. To find additional cases, we would click on the key number. Here this would be 2520. And this is now going to open us up to the digest and provide for us all of the cases the editor have determined cite that same point of law. And this number here you see is 35. So there are 35 less than or equal to 35 cases that have cited it, and you can see through that some of the cases are duplicates, but because they might have multiple headnotes that cite to this point of law. But we see we have a good collection of it. For our purposes, though, assuming we're in the 10th Circuit, this doesn't help us find mandatory authority. So we would like to change our jurisdiction, which we can do here. We can click on change. We can change to the 10th Circuit and remove the 9th Circuit. We apply the filtering button, and lo and behold, we get 20 cases. So now we're more confident about the set that we have. It is interesting to note they included U.S. Supreme Court cases in the result set, which is wonderful. And then we can start looking through these cases and determining what is relevant for us in the digest for this particular point of law. So this is a lot less cases than Lexus provided, and Lexus takes a different approach. They take a much broader approach to finding cases, and you notice that you don't find Rapanos in this listing of cases. And that's okay. We looked at a particular narrow subtopic within our headnote system, and Rapanos might not be categorized in that particular subtopic, but we can work our way back up through the hierarchy to broaden the number of cases that are cited. You see, under water law, generally there are 3,247. Navigability in general is up to 123. We can work our way up by clicking on that and begin to search through cases. So if you find that your selection of cases is too few, you can work your way through the digest hierarchy to find additional cases. All right, so that is two of the ways in which we can find cases. Of course, in Westlaw, you could go to the main screen for Westlaw and start your search directly in the key number digest by clicking on key number. Here is all of those topics, and we could do something like navigable waters and see what they suggest we can find information on. And no surprise, here we are, water law, and here are the same topics and key numbers that we were using before. All right, let's now talk about a citator, but before I demonstrate that, let me show some things about it.
So far we've discussed keyword searching and structured searching using the headnote and the digest to find cases. The last method is a citator. And really, the function of the citator is to validate our cases and to see if they're still good law, but they allow us to find cases. Before we get to that, though, there's some vocabulary that we need to learn in order to understand how to interpret what we're looking at when we look at a citator. There is the original case. Sometimes this is called the key cited case. And the original case is the case that we're actually running the report on, the citator report on. So that's, if you will, is the base case. And then when you get the report, you're going to see two kinds of citations. You're going to see what's called the history, sometimes referred to as direct history, prior history, or subsequent history. This is how the case fared within its appellate line. So if it's an intermediate court of appeals case, what happened when it went up to the final court of appeals in its jurisdiction or beyond, if it went up into the federal, from state to federal courts. And the language you might see for how it's treated is reversed or affirmed, right? Because the higher courts can reverse or affirm what the lower court said. But there's a different kind of history to look at when we're doing a citator report. And this is outside of the appellate line. You'll see this either as citing decisions or citing sources or citing references or even indirect history. And this is cases which have cited our case either positively or negatively, right? And that what you'll see for the types of language discussing those cases is either overruled or questioned or followed. If the later case liked the earlier case, they'll say that they followed. So that's the language. When you look at a Citator report, there's some items on the report that I want to draw your attention to that'll make it easier to figure out what's going on. Sometimes in the Citator report, you'll see that the later case has cited our case and put quotes around it. That means it's quoted the cited case or the original case. They also have depth of treatment indicators. These are generally little filled in boxes. We'll look at those in a minute, that tell you to what extent the later case discussed our earlier case. It goes up to 4 boxes. If they're filled in, that means there's a lot of discussion. If it's like 1 box, it's like essentially a chain site of some kind. You can narrow the report down by jurisdiction, and then you should look also that you can filter the report by headnotes, which is extremely useful, as you can find those cases that are directly related to our case. And so let's go ahead and take a look. Before we do that, so as I said, the value of the citator is it answers the question whether or not our case is still good law. It answers whether or not we can still use the case. The way in which these systems express themselves is usually through some sort of a colored signal. So a red stop sign or a red flag would indicate that the case is no longer good law. A yellow flag would indicate that there's cautionary analysis, that some later court has questioned our opinion in some way, and we need to look carefully at it. And then there's usually green or blue indicators, which suggest that the opinion is fine, it's just been cited. So I do want to point out something very important about the color of those flags. Even though your case may have a red or yellow flag, that there might be some negative treatment or cautionary analysis, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't use the case for the purpose for which you'll use it. So there are 2 ways this is done. One is the case itself has been reversed or overruled. In that situation, particularly where it's been reversed, you really can't use it, right? Because a higher court has said that the opinion of the lower court is just not valid. You want to stay away from that case. If the case is outside of the appellate line, though, you may still be able to use it because it may be valid in your jurisdiction, but it may not be very sound authority in which to rely. The other way is where it can receive negative treatment is on some point of law discussed within the case. That's all of those headnotes, right? So if you have a case with multiple headnotes and one of the headnotes has been challenged by a later court, but you're not using the case for that headnote, chances are you can still use it. You need to read it carefully and make a determination that that's the case. And maybe there's better authority out there you can use, but it doesn't absolutely invalidate the case for you. All right, so that's validating the case. That's the main function of the citator. The second function is expanding our case law research. That's all those citing references. And the concept here is that if a later case has cited your case, that means that the later case has some logical relationship to our case. And we can look at those citing references to find additional cases. So we have 2 different ways to find additional cases. It's the citator using the citing references and the headnotes. So we have to put ourselves as in a point in time. The headnotes, the digest, will cite all cases that are related to our case, regardless of when those cases were decided. So some of those cases could be decided after our case was decided or before our case was decided. It doesn't matter. They've collected all of the cases. The citator does, what the citing references do, is provide all of those cases after our case was decided that are related to our case. So it's a future looking, if you will, future looking from the point in which our case was decided, review of cases. So at this point, let's go ahead and do a demonstration of the citator.
So here we are again with our case, and in Westlaw, this is the Leslie Salt Company case. And now what we want to look for is the various citator indicators in KeyCite. So KeyCite is essentially built into the review of the case. You see the little icon here, powered by KeyCite. And it's expressed through the flag, and the indication immediately tells us it's declined to extend by this US v. Milner case in the Ninth Circuit, which is relevant because this is a Ninth Circuit case. It's also expressed through these negative treatment, history, and citing references tabs. So what we would do is we'd first note this decline to extend, and then we'd want to look at the negative treatment tab. And this is going to give us those cases which are most negative. The Milner case, which we saw already, and then you'll see these three other cases have distinguished our case, including an appellate court, or sorry, district court decision. Looking at the report, we see the date in which the cases were decided. Then here are those depth of treatment indicators. So this Milner case discussed our case quite a bit, right? There are 4 depth of treatment indicators. And we can also realize that there's a quote mark next to Milner, which means Milner quoted our case and discussed it a whole bunch. And they discussed it particularly about head notes 1, 5, and 7 of our case, of the Leslie Salt Company case. That's what those head notes refer to. So we could open up to the Milner case, and this will provide us with the specific information about where our case is discussed, right? So we can look at the search term, and it drops us down to that point in the case where our case is cited, and the head notes within. These are the head notes within the Milner case where our point of law is discussed, and then what the discussion is. And we even see the quotes, all places covered by the ebb and flow, etc., etc. So now that is one way to use the cited report. We found a case that questions our case. We could, if we wanted to, click just specifically on the head notes to find those head notes that are relevant from these listing of cases. We can also look at the history, though. Let's go look at the history within the appellate line. Westlaw provides a nice graphical presentation of our case, reversing in part. You can see where it derived from the Northern District of California, worked its way up, etc., etc. Which is a nice way to view it. Here are the documents written out. And then the citing references, that was the other part of it, right? So we've looked at the case within its direct history. Now we're in the indirect history of the citing references. We find that there are 241 citing references, but there are only 58 cases. There are 10 administrative decisions, 97 secondary sources, etc. We'd want to narrow down by cases. And then we have some post search filters that we can apply. For example, we can select a certain jurisdiction, courts of appeals. We find actually one in the 10th Circuit. We could click on that. So there's a 10th Circuit case that would apply for our problem here in Colorado. We can limit by the depth of treatment. And then we can also limit by the head note topics. Right here are the ones dealing with water law. We can specify within those which head notes from our case that we would like to look at. We are actually looking at head note 3, and then we can select it that we want to select it and find all of those cases, right, for head note 3. And then of course we see the long list of citing references, and there we go. So I guess what we could do is click on the 10th Circuit and apply the filter. And here is the 10th Circuit case that cited to Leslie Salt's case. For head notes 6 and 7, which may not apply to our problem, but we'd have to do a little more research to make sure that indeed was the case. I want to go back to the document for 1 second more and look back at the head notes. When we looked at the head notes, we found additional head notes by clicking on the head note topic and subtopic. Here, though, we could do this. This is looking at those head notes within the key cite report. 5 cases that cite this head note. This is actually obviously a much narrower number of cases than if we just looked in the digest system. But here are the 5 cases from our key cite report that cite the head note. All right, that's how Westlaw handles it. What does Lexus do? So here's Lexus, and Lexus uses Shepard's, and we see the same sort of cautionary treatment. Here is a yellow triangle, tells us possible negative treatment is indicated. And to the right hand side here, this panel, it gives us the Shepard's summary. And so we see that there are 88 citing decisions, There are 3 cautionary analysis cases, 3 positive, 3 neutral, and cited by 83, and there's other citing sources. So we would like to shepherdise this document or look at the citator report. We do this by clicking on the link. And this brings us to the complete report. Much like the West KeyCite report, we can do some post-search filters. We can narrow by the treatment. We can narrow by the jurisdiction. There's the 10th Circuit with our one case. We can narrow by state courts and the discussion. Here we have the 4 bars filled out. And then we can narrow by the Lexus headnotes. And this is worth pointing out that the Lexus headnotes and Westlaw headnotes are not interchangeable. As you saw, there are more headnotes on the Lexus case than the Westlaw case. But it works, the concept works the same way at least. So here are those cases, but now we'd like to find the negative cases, and it shows, the Lexus report shows 3 negative cases, 1 from the 4th, 1 from the 9th, 2 from the 9th, the later Leslie Salt Company case. And here's Milner, that was identified in Westlaw as well. So one thing you note is that there were, I believe, 4 negative cases in Westlaw and only 3 here. So this is editorial judgment. The editors at Lexus, editors at West can read it a little bit differently and come up with different conclusions about which cases treat it negatively. And sometimes you'll find that a case in Lexus might have a red stop sign and one in Westlaw only has cautionary analysis, which makes it kind of hard for us, right, to use this system, either of these systems, as clear and definite rules. What you need to do is use the signals as guides, as indicators that there might be a problem with the case, and look carefully at the case and the citing cases and the history that cite your case to see why your case has been treated negatively. But the same concept is here. So here are the cases, and let's assume we wanted to look at, there's the cautionary analysis cases. We can select multiple of these if we wish. We can select the cited by as well. And then we can expand it to other citing sources. And lo and behold, we find additional court documents and law reviews, and we can even search within the search results. So this is the Lexus way of doing a citator called Shepard's, and both will get you to validate and to expand your case law research.
So at this point, we have looked at how to find cases either starting with secondary authority or an annotated code. We know we can do finding cases using keywords, whether natural searching or Boolean searching, and particularly using fields, which can be a very powerful way to do searching. Plus, now we've looked at the structured ways of finding cases using a headnote or headnotes and the digest system, whether that system be in Westlaw or in Lexus Advanced. And finally, we've looked at how to validate and extend our case law using the citator. If you have any additional questions, please just let me know.